Some of the content contained in this podcast may prove challenging to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Please contact a member of your local support group or a relevant and accredited support organisation if affected and help is required. Hello, and welcome to My Service, My Story Vietnam, a collaborative podcast between the Warragul RSL and the Warragul and Druin Gazette. My name is Nicholas Duck. I'm a journalist with the Warragul and Druin Gazette, and joining me today is Warragul local and Vietnam veteran Terry Gleeson. Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Well, if you don't mind, we're going to just jump straight in. We're going to go back to the very start, before your service in Vietnam. Please tell me about your childhood, where you grew up, where you went to school, what you were doing before you went over to Vietnam.
Well, I wasn't born locally, but I was 3 months old when I was moved to Neerim South. Born in Terang in Victoria, western Victoria. My people had a sawmill at Neerim South, which I lived there in the 3 mile out of Neerim South in the bush for 9 years, and while we're on that sawmill, and then schooled at Neerim South primary school. We then moved to a little place called Crossover, which is just out the road from Warragul. I schooled there for another couple of years and went into Warragul Tech School, which I finished Form 4 there and ended up getting an apprenticeship as a builder from there. In all that time we had to register for National Service and hadn't finished my apprenticeship, so I was deferred until such time as I'd finished. So 1968 in October saw me go into the Puckapunyal training camp in Victoria. So 10 weeks training at Puckapunyal. At the end of the day we were asked what corps we would like to go into when we went into to Vietnam, and I said infantry, and the second choice was engineers. Somehow or another they gave me the engineers choice, which was fine, and after a couple of weeks leave I caught a train from Melbourne to Sydney to commence the engineers training course at Casula in Sydney. That course ran for 10 weeks, and at the end of that we were told, or I was told, I would go to Vietnam and had to do the jungle training at Canungra in Queensland. So that was, I think that lasted a couple of weeks, and then back to Sydney, and within a couple of weeks I was shot off to Vietnam. The jungle training was quite interesting, quite hard, but it didn't hurt you at all. It was quite good. We'd met a lot of mates in corps training, which was the engineers training, where we learned a lot about mines and booby traps and explosives and weapon handling and all that type of thing. Arriving in Vietnam was in April of '69, which made me about 7 months in the army, I think, and then I was shot off to Vietnam, which was pretty short. On arriving there, I was placed in a field troop. All my mates went to another different outfits, but I, for some reason, was thrown into a field troop, which was quite interesting. It was a bit different to a lot of the other engineer corps. We were actually field engineers and also combat engineers, and we received a name years later as tunnel rats, one of the jobs we used to do over there as well.
Before you went over to Vietnam, what it was like being conscripted? Because obviously that's not really something that I would know about, so I'm just interested in hearing about the experience before you even went over to training, like how that affected your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the getting back to prior to all that was being conscripted into National Service. It was a trying time. There was different mates were getting, some were going, some weren't. I didn't mind at all when I was told that I would go in. I thought, well, that's fine. It's what is what it is. And I thoroughly enjoyed the whole scenario of it all, not knowing really what to expect. You heard stories, but you didn't sort of take most of them on board. But it was certainly a change from civvy life. But it didn't. It was real. I felt it was really good for you. Training, the fitness, just the meeting of different walks of life, all different guys from all around the place, and we're all on one level, which was great.
Did I hear it correctly that when it came to conscription that you hadn't actually entered the ballot? Was that?
Yeah, for some reason I'd overlooked it all, and as our mate Keith knows, he was actually in the courtroom that day, taking a few notes. Yes, and I guess because of that too, I was actually made go into the army. But I think I was away somewhere working, might have been in Albury or something, out the back of Albury for a period of time, and then one thing led to another, and before we knew it, we forgot to register. So anyway, that didn't bother me in the finish. It was never ever brought up again. I thought it might have been during my service, but never was, and I just continued on like everyone else, and enjoyed it, and got through it, and no regrets whatsoever about any of my army service.
Well, I was going to go a bit more in depth, I guess, into your training and all that. What was that like for you? I know you touched on it and said that you actually got something out of it, but did you find it difficult at first to adjust to being in army training like that?
No, I don't think any of it was a real big issue. I was always reasonably fit because I was sort of in the building game, so the fitness part of it wasn't a problem. I guess the being told all the time what to do was a bit of a learning curve, but I guess that didn't hurt either in the long run. And we were doing something different all the time.
Yeah.
The whole period that we were learning, be it at Puckapunyal or in Sydney, we were learning all the time, every day, learning something different, and getting more familiar with the army all the time made a big difference.
Could you tell me a bit more about what it was like being trained as an engineer? Because I've only spoken to, so far, two blokes who were infantrymen.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just interested in hearing what that was like for you in a different role.
Well, the engineers training, they cover quite a broad spectrum, the engineers. They go from plant operators to a lot of tradesmen are involved in engineers, carpenters, plumbers, electricians. Some fellas got those particular roles within Australia for those couple of years. Others had the similar role in Vietnam for the 12 months they were over there. I was a carpenter and I didn't get a carpenter's job. I got a field engineer's job, but we all done the same training, which was playing with or learning how to handle explosives, weapons, grenades, booby traps, tunnel searching, building fire support bases, filling sandbags occasionally. Yeah, so we had quite a role of different things to do. Another one we done was even bridge building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with what they called a Bailey Bridge. It was all in bits and pieces, and used to construct them across rivers. Not that we ever done it in Vietnam, but it was part of training. So, as I said, it covered quite a wide spectrum of what engineers got up to.
When you finished your engineer training, did you feel fully prepared?
In that role, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, and then the jungle training, we learned a lot more about the infantry side of things, or it wouldn't have been as much as the infantry learnt, but we learnt a bit there to keep us out of trouble in a situation. And we felt fine about it all. But on joining the field engineers in Vietnam, we worked in twos most of the time, and one was an experience from being in Vietnam. and the other one was just a new bloke, and he just learnt from him, or from the others, yeah. Sometimes you wondered whether you'd had enough training on certain things, especially the grenades, not grenades, the booby trap side of things.
So your job was to go in and
delouse booby traps and and mines, clear mines and stuff. But we had in our unit we had a mines room that had all the stuff that we had been collected over the years that the Viet Cong and Charlie had used against us. So we had to familiarise ourselves with those and see how they operated. A lot were very, very simple. Very simple, quite brilliant actually, to trigger off explosives and things, and without ever noticing them. But our role was to notice, but sometimes you didn't see all of them.
I was going to ask what it was like when you first arrived in Vietnam. Had you ever been out of the country before?
Not really.
No. And how old were you when you went over?
22.
22. Yeah. Well, what was it like arriving in Vietnam out of Australia for the first time?
Yeah, well, it was quite exciting getting on a plane.
Had you ever been on one before?
No.
No.
Yes. So a flight across. Yeah, we stopped at Darwin. It was so hot, couldn't believe the heat.
Yeah.
And then again in Singapore, which was probably hotter. And couldn't believe the heat there. But arriving in Saigon, as it was called in them days, in Vietnam, we boarded a plane, I think it was a Yank plane, but the guys were running around checking the oil leaks on the engines and stuff before we took off. So that made it pretty interesting. So yes, so that was pretty exciting, but at the same time nerve-wracking. Yeah. Are we going to get anywhere in this bloody old plane? But and then landing at Nui Dat, where I was placed in one troop of one field squadron. I was the only one to go to that troop at the time, like a newcomer. So, but I was accepted, no problems. We got on quite well with everybody. And then the work started from there for the next 12 months.
Was there anything about Vietnam that took you by surprise that maybe you weren't expecting?
In just the people in general. Once you started getting out of camp and running through villages and things and just noticing the way they actually live compared to us was quite a shock, but something that you soon got used to and accepted that that's the way it was.
What kind of reception did you get from the locals?
Well, often all right. All the little kids wanted a cigarette off you.
Yeah.
Kids were only table high, but they still wanted a cigarette, or you throw your butt down and 10 of them would pounce on the butt for a smoke. But in general, they were all right, but never really showed much. Gave us a lot of attention, really.
Yeah.
We never bothered about them too much.
Well, then, looking at your service in Vietnam, what did an average day look like for you? What the kinds of things were you doing out there?
Oh, yeah. Well, we had different days, of course, as we all would, but normally if you're in camp, you would start off with parade or breakfast. I can't sure now, at a reasonably early hour. And then a parade in the morning where you took your pills for malaria and one other thing, I can't remember what that was. And then you start your day if you're in camp. If you might have to go with a section of trucks or something up the highway to bring back convoys. And being it was one of our jobs to no one went anywhere without us because of the chance of mines and what have you. So if trucks went out of the camp, there'd be a couple of engineers on it and bringing in the convoys from American convoys down the highways. We would be there. The APCs and tanks, if they were on operation, we would go with them as well. And of course the infantry. So on these days that we class as normal days, we could be in camp or we could have been out with the infantry on patrols and what have you for 4 or 6 weeks at a time, doing our role out there as, once again, keeping our eyes out for booby traps and mines. And if we come across bunker systems, did they tell you what bunkers were?
Came up in one of our other talks.
They're just where they lived. Charlie lived in holes in the ground, all linked together with trenches and sometimes tunnels. And on top of there, the holes were some about as big as this room, actually. They would have the top just covered in logs and earth, and they would grow the jungle back on top.
Yeah.
So you never knew they were there until you actually walked into them. So we would spend time then blowing those bunkers up, blow the walls in and the ceilings, the roofs down. Normally 2 blokes couldn't handle that, so we would chopper in more engineers and explosives to do it. And then we'd blow them and just move on with the infantry again and keep searching for more sorts of stuff to play with.
How common was it to find booby traps and stuff like that?
Most times the booby traps weren't too bad, but it was the tunnel systems and bunker systems that you'd probably find them every operation you went on. And later in the piece, in my tour there, having a lot of trouble with the M16 mine that you may have heard about, that was the Australians actually put the minefields in, and then Charlie was taking the mines out and using them back against us. I think the minefield was put in 67, and then in 69 they were using them against us full bore. So they were a problem. But yeah, generally most operations went quite well. We'd probably come under a few contacts and one thing and another, but the infantry boys would look after that. We were mainly at the end of the line, often tailing Charlie. They had us engineers doing, so Charlie was sneaking up behind the group. We'd have to keep our eye behind us.
Just to clarify, Charlie means the Viet Cong.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Do you know why they're called Charlie? I've never heard them.
Just a good name, I think.
Yeah. Fair enough. I figured out through context that that's what you're talking about, but at the same time I thought in my head I better double check before I go off and
they had North Vietnamese Army, and then they had the Viet Cong. So both enemies, of course, but the North Vietnamese Army were quite a well-trained outfit.
Yeah.
And I think any of the grunts will tell you if you run into a mob of them, you knew who you'd run into, because they would stand and fight a lot more than the others.
Yeah. So once you engineers had run into a booby trap that you had to deal with, what did that process look like?
Well, we would stop everyone and tell them not to move anywhere until we'd sorted. Often they were a tripwire hooked to a tree or something one end, and then a grenade the other, when the wire would just simply pull the pin on the grenade. A lot of various things were tried. Charlie would collect all the unexploded bombs and things that he could and make his own devices out of them, just in bits and pieces, and use all types of detonation systems to make them go off. Normally something that was electrical, which seemed to work quite well, rather than tripwires and those sort of things. But normally we would try and stop any movement whatsoever until we sorted out what it was and where it was.
Yeah.
The mines were the worst things, because once they would someone stepped on them, it was just total devastation, and we would stop anyone from even moving an inch in those situations.
Are those the kinds of... So you mean like when they stepped on a mine, it was the kind that as soon as you step off, that's when it...
Well, yeah. But these mines were designed to get a metre high and then explode, and they would cut. They really were a savage bit of gear. So we would, because normally they would plant, Charlie would plant more than one. He wouldn't just do one. He'd put one in and hopefully someone would step on that, and then in all the confusion step on the others. So we had to make sure everyone was stopped where they were, and we'd have to start just prodding with our bayonets to make tracks to get people in and out, bring in the medical crew from the helicopters. So there was always a lot of confusion, and often enough you would, somewhere in the vicinity, someone would step on another one and you'd have it all over again. It was just a terrible bloody thing.
It's a lot of responsibility for you guys as well, just to be the tip of the spear against that sort of thing.
It was, but it felt good if you did find a couple. You know you'd saved a couple of lives doing it. And, but they were our worst enemy, I think, the mines. Anything else we could handle, but they were just... And you didn't know they were there normally until you hit them, someone stepped on them.
How many engineers would you be working with?
A section was 10 of us. We would support an infantry company with one section, so 2 to each. God, what are they called? Company? Oh, that's terrible, I've forgotten that. Anyway, we would one company we would support with 10 engineers.
Yeah.
And we'd go for the tour with them, and then we had 4 sections in my troop, and every time we worked mainly with 6 battalion, and we would all go to separate companies, 10 guys to each company for the duration of the operation. Platoons I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, there you go. I should probably know that, being a journalist with the understanding of English. I should probably remember
forgetting that. Yeah, so and each 2 blokes, 2 engineers with each platoon.
Yeah.
And then if we found something that required more, they would bring out another half a dozen or 10 blokes from Nui Dat.
Yeah.
Maybe a different troop, which often happened because a lot of the systems we found were just too big for a couple of blokes to charge up or search. A lot of the time took ages to search things.
Yeah, I'm interested in, I guess, the relationship that you guys would have with the infantrymen, because these guys are relying on you a lot. What was that relationship like?
Yeah, it was quite good. Not that we lived in each other's pockets, so to speak, but we were always invited to their after operation party, as you want to call it a party. It was just have a few beers and probably a barbecue.
Yeah.
We were always invited to those. And if you work with the one platoon enough, you got to know a lot of the blokes, but often you didn't. You were just sort of with different platoons and one thing and another. And it was the same with the tanks and APCs. We would have 2 guys with each, not each tank or APC, but each section they had. And we would ride on the front tank or APC, which wasn't a good idea, because if they got blown up, we got blown up with them. But we were supposed to be able to detect trouble from front of an APC travelling at whatever kilometres an hour and pick up a mine on the ground. But the main problem was river crossing, creek crossings.
Oh, yeah.
We would always get off and check them out before they crossed them. So it was quite an interesting thing to do over there. Yeah. And then we would get calls from villages too. They would come across mines in their village.
Oh, really? Wow, okay.
We would have to go out and pick them up, delouse them, pick them up.
I mean, it's fair to say that you've probably saved a great deal many lives through the work you did over there.
I like to think of it that way.
I know me listening to you right now, I mean, I'm 26, I'm a few years older than you would have been over there, but that, you know, the idea of being the first port of call against that sort of thing, I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
It's a pretty scary prospect for me just hearing it, to be honest. It's a lot.
Yeah, well, it was, it got a bit scary, but I guess being that age you were, and you couldn't, if you didn't do it, someone had to do it. So you didn't want to let anyone down.
What was it like with your fellow engineers? Did you sort of bond with one another, or?
Oh yeah, we're pretty thick. Yeah, we used to get into a lot of trouble together.
Yeah. You put a bunch of 22-year-olds anywhere, they're always going to get into trouble.
We're pretty much known for that. But no, we were. And another trouble thing with it is if there were fatal casualties, you couldn't do anything about it. You just had to keep doing what you were doing. And when all the operations finished, you'd have a bit of a church service or something back in camp, but you couldn't dwell on the thing at the moment.
Yeah.
You had to press on, just had to take it and
that's a lot for anyone.
keep going. Yeah.
Just having to.
I think that was probably the toughest part of it all. But anyway, you had to do it. And I, fortunately or unfortunately, got 2 stripes over there, corporal stripes. I got involved in a lot of stuff early in my tour, and I sort of learned a bit of what was going on pretty early. And as my section commander went home, I stepped up and took his job.
Oh wow! What was that like?
Yeah, that was all right. It gave me a lot extra work, but I didn't mind it. Quite enjoyed it, and it didn't make much difference because I think I might have got a bit more pay or something, but and a few extra different roles. But you were still the same bloke with the boys. You're all the same.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing. Didn't matter. Just that maybe you had a say in some things that normally you wouldn't.
I know you mentioned that you and the boys would maybe get up to a bit of trouble. Is there anything in your mind that sticks out?
Well, we used to get on the booze quite a bit, as most blokes did over there, I guess. We had a flagpole in our unit, one field squadron, and a couple of the boys one night, for a bit of revenge on the CO, they blew the flagpole down.
Really?
Middle of the night.
Oh, jeez, they'd be held to pay the next day.
C4 and whatever. Anyway, there was one of the sergeants walking past the pole at the time. It was in the dark, and it didn't hurt him, but boy, it frightened the hell out of him. So anyway, there was a big kerfuffle over that, but no one stepped forward when they were asked who'd done it. And they never ever found out, but the story was written up a few years back. The boys dobbed themselves in that done it, so...
Oh, well, I suppose
just an
a few decades later, you figure there's probably no consequences going to come from this.
Just little things that... and they would place... if one of the staff, the lieutenants or something, got a bit cocky, they'd wire his bed up with explosives. Just to let him, I better settle down a bit here.
Yeah, just to let him know everyone's paying attention.
Yeah. So there was a fair bit of stuff like that went on. But
well, I suppose you need that levity when, every other time you're out and about and you...
We were a hell of a mixture of blokes. But as I say, we all levelled out pretty much over there, but there were some pretty wild boys amongst the group as well.
Yeah, you weren't among the wild ones?
No, I was probably middle.
Yeah.
Mediocre. But no, some pretty rough characters, so... Yeah, but that's good. It's made the unit up.
Oh, well, that's the kind of thing that would bring you together, as much as the dangerous stuff would. I'm guessing the laughs that you'd have behind the scenes would bring you together in just the same way.
Oh, yeah. We used to also build fire support bases. You know what they were? They were a base they'd build, instead of operating from the main Nui Dat every day, they'd build a support base out in the bush somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Like quite a few k's out. And then the infantry and everyone would operate out of there. And so they had to be constructed, and often the engineers would do that, or part of it. And I can recall, even though we were out there supporting the infantry, we actually built a tank stand for water. And the tank stand was probably 10 foot high, 3 metres high. But they chop it in with one of those Chinooks with the twin blades each end. You seen those things? Quite
Don't think I have,
big
but-
bit of gear. They chop it in this big container, or not a container, like a ladder of water, and sat it on top of the tank stand. And I can remember we built the stand pretty strong, quite solid, and because that base would have been there for quite a while. So
Yeah.
everyone had to be comfortable and have your water and all that sort of thing. But often too, those same bases were heavily attacked, usually at night by Charlie. So you weren't out of the woods yet. So
No.
you still had, and then we operated out of there. We'd go out for days on end from those bases. So we would help construct those,
Yeah.
filling sandbags and digging trenches and all that sort of stuff.
So when you got to the end of your service and the end was in sight, you were about to go home to Australia, how'd you feel?
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. It's always a worrying time because you've lasted all that time and yet you're still active with doing what you do. Up to a couple of weeks to go home, you're starting to... Your mind's not in the right place. It wanders up to going home and what am I doing? What am I doing out here, so to speak? But yeah, it comes along quick enough, and then the send-offs by all the fellas is just great. It's just one great booze up the night before. So by the time you get on the plane to leave camp and head down back to Saigon, you're not in very good condition. That was tradition, and that's the way it worked. Because we went over in our 1s and 2s, and whereas the infantry went over as a bulk group, so we were quite different.
Yeah.
We replaced. My turn to come home, someone would have been probably flying over that day I flew out to replace me. So that's how our engineer units worked. They weren't a bulk group going over and coming back. I think that gave us the advantage then of learning off the blokes that had been there for the time. I think that was a good system, worked well.
And what about when you arrived back in Australia?
That was quite different. I remember having to stay in Sydney for one night, and a fella that was killed over there, actually a friend of mine, his wife picked me up from the airport and took her to her place for the night, and I think we just yacked and had a few drinks, and following morning caught a plane back to Melbourne. I think my parents were there to pick me up, come back to Warragul, and it was all quite different. Just too different, really. I think you're missing just where you were. You probably wish you were still there. But yeah, you sort of got over it after a while. But I remember going to a party, I think, a few days after I'd got home, and so many people didn't know where I'd been.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. You just seem to be forgotten, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must have been hard.
Yeah, it was a bit. You think, come on, no one really cared much. Because then I had to do another 5 months at Puckapunyal before I was actually discharged.
Oh, really?
That was quite hard.
Yeah. So what, training others or?
Not really. They had us building Viet Cong villages and all these things, and on parade, and we weren't used to parades and things.
Yeah.
It just didn't... I really believe they should have let us go home because it was just...
It's too much.
Just couldn't handle the bullshit, so to speak,
Yeah.
that the army have, but Vietnam was totally different. You didn't have all that. So needless to say, and then a lot of the mates were coming back. I was actually acting sergeant at Pucka, which I absolutely hated, and had to take the parades, and all the boys were clearing off, and they'd tell me they were going, and then I'd have to report to the boss in the morning.
Yeah.
Say, so-and-so, they're all at the doctors and all this stuff, and it just got so much. So in the finish, I told them they could have me stripes back. I didn't want them. Didn't need them.
Became a bit much.
Just wasn't right.
Yeah.
So with that, they put me in the mess. This is the army for you. they put me in the mess because I hadn't been in the mess, so they put me in.
The mess being?
The kitchen.
The kitchen, thought so. Just wanted to check.
Washing dishes and stuff. They put me in there for a couple of weeks and made me move my tent. They were they weren't real good to me.
Yeah.
All because I just wanted to bow out of what I was doing.
Yeah.
So anyway, eventually we got through all that and come along to discharge. And I remember the day we went for discharge at somewhere in Melbourne there. It was a queue a mile long. So a couple of us said, bugger this, we'll shoot down the pub for an hour.
Yeah.
Well, we come back and the queue had gone. They'd closed the shop. So in the Army's wisdom, they charged us a day AWOL.
Oh.
So that's
Really?
another day we had to make up. So that went on for a couple of days because I refused to go back the next day. When I did go back, they said, you owe me another day, and I just got crazy. So eventually I got discharged, and thought, thank God for that. But
yeah,
on going back to Puckapunyal after Vietnam, I wanted to join on. I really, really enjoyed it. And,
oh, really?
But I didn't want to stay in Australia. I think there was a couple of places they could have sent me, but couldn't send me back to Vietnam. It was too early to go back.
So you were willing to go back?
I would have gone back.
Yeah. Wow.
I probably should have signed on, extended my stay.
Yeah.
In the first place, but I thought, no, that's a bit dicky.
Yeah.
So anyway, they said, no, we can't guarantee you this or that. You'll do as you're told. And I said, well, sorry, I'm getting out. So I got out. So yeah, I quite enjoyed the Army. It was good.
There you go. Sorry, I just don't think I've spoken to anyone who said, I would have happily gone back. That's a new one for me.
Yeah.
There you go. I guess once you get used to
life
over there,
it is, I guess.
You sort of, you get used to it and don't want to do it another one.
Just that comradeship too, you just wouldn't find anywhere else.
Well, once you returned, Vietnam as a war was, a bit politically charged, unpopular in a lot of areas. How did you find the reception once you returned? Telling people that you were in Vietnam? No good.
No. So, I think from that initial business of just copping it everywhere you went, you just shut up after a while. You never told anyone that you'd even been. Never showed any sign of it. I can remember getting a award from the Bawbaw Shire, and the Shire boss at the time was Ian Clark, and he presented the paper and stuff, and he said, Terry, I didn't even know you'd been to Vietnam. I'm 30, 40 years age by this time. Yeah. So that's just how you kept it quiet.
Was that difficult? Was that painful to, keep such a large part of your life quiet?
I guess not in the time that we were doing it, because you were busy with your work and maybe family, and didn't try and let it get in your road too much. But I think later on down the track, when the Vietnam veterans started to get a bit of a hold in different places, RSLs and things, it became a lot better.
Yeah.
We could actually talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. Was it good to talk about it?
Oh, well, yeah. I don't know. I can't really remember much, but I know it was good. It's good now that we've got, or has been for many years, since we got all our marching in Melbourne and Anzac Days and all that together. It's been great.
Yeah.
And I think there was something written there about the welcome home too, wasn't there?
Yeah. Did you go to that?
I went up to that, yeah.
Yeah. How was that?
That was probably one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, that was good. Because most of the blokes that I was with anyway, they went to that.
Yeah. Do you still keep in touch with them, by the way?
With a few, yeah.
Yeah.
A couple have died and what have you, but a few of them still around. But we're very scattered. We were just plucked out of all around Australia and put into a unit, and I don't know of any. I have no close mates up this way anyway that was with me. So that was really good, and I think that from that day on we started having a few reunions
Yeah, good.
every year or two. And yeah,
So it was definitely a beneficial thing to go to.
That was a good thing, yeah.
It was a good thing.
It was a real good thing.
That's good.
Mm.
And how about these days? I mean, I know we've talked before. You said you maybe aren't too involved with the RSL, but what do you get up to these days?
Not much.
Not much?
Catch up occasionally with a couple of old mates. I used to march in Melbourne for years. I marched in Melbourne under the tunnel rat flag down there, but that's died off a bit now too.
Well, how about, sharing your stories on even something like this? I mean, do you think it's important to pass on those stories and those experiences to the younger generations and the next generations?
Yeah, I think so. I think it should be a good thing. Someone will get something out of it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone, but someone might.
Well, I know I'm getting something out of it just by sitting here and chatting to you right now. So.
Yeah, I actually went back to Vietnam probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, yeah?
With a group of tunnel rats. I think it was about 40 of us went back. But the guy that runs the show, he'd been back quite a few times and he'd taken other groups back. And we actually, through this guy that runs our association, we actually visited an old Viet Cong in his house, him and his wife.
Really?
Had to talk to him via an interpreter. And he was very interesting. And he was a little tunnel rat when he was 16 or something. Yeah. And he'd tell us these stories and where they'd get in the tunnels and where we were, and he knew all about it.
That's fascinating, hearing it from the other side all those years later.
It was great.
Yeah.
And they'd both been shot to bits. They had bullet holes all over them, but and then we went to a couple of the sites where we'd had mine incidents. We were able to find those through GPS and all that stuff these days. So we toured into the bush and found those places. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Visited a Viet Cong cemetery.
Yeah, wow.
Which is immaculate, absolutely immaculate. I thought they'd think nothing of it, but yeah, they're just like us. They're very particular with their cemeteries and their, not a church, but sort of memorial things.
Yeah. Did it give you a new perspective on things?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of things like that were great.
Well, that's just about all the points that I wanted to go through. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention? Any stories? Anything that you wanted to bring up of your own accord?
No, I don't think so.
No. I think we've cleared pretty much.
One thing for the RSL, I reckon it's pretty good these days. I mean, I've been going back for 18 months, I suppose. I reckon they're doing a great job down there.
Yeah, good to hear. Oh, good to hear that, you're getting something out of it then.
Yeah. So I quite enjoy going there on different occasions.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Terry, and for sharing your stories and being so open about it all. It's very much appreciated.
Good on you. Thank you.
Thank you. The Warragul and Druin Gazette and the Warragul RSL would like to thank our guests for sharing their opinions and recollections of their service in Vietnam, as well as their later experiences after returning back into civilian life.